My name is Tom Harris, and this is Exploratory Journeys. My guest today is Joseph Benamy. Joseph is a communications expert, political advisor, and actually is the producer of our show. So welcome to the show, Joseph.
Good day, Tom.
Great.
That's my radio voice, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's a good voice.
My radio personality.
That's my voice. Anyway, so we're going to talk today about the International Climate Science Coalition Canada. And what we've decided is that in looking over the last few years, the campaign to move Canada away from the effort to stop climate change has generally failed. And we've been looking into that, and you've been studying that too. Joseph, you've been interviewing various people, and why do you think they think that the effort to stop the climate mitigation programs, what are you hearing from other people as to why it's failed?
Well, I don't hear a lot from other people about why it's failed so much. What I hear from people is why they're doing it with I think the forlorn hope that the strategy and tactics that they've taken are going to be successful. And, let me preface all of the discussion that we're going to have, Tom, because there's going to be a certain amount of criticism, if you will, of how things have been done in the past. And I think it's worth, pausing for a moment to say that our intent is not to attack anybody or to say, you people are wrong or anything like that. There's a lot of good work that's being done on this file from the climate realist perspective. Mm-hmm. And all of the work that's being done, it's not just that it's good work, it's effective, but it's effective only in a limited degree. And so the question is, what other things can you be doing, or what can you be doing differently? But really, essentially, more importantly, what other things can you be doing to be more effective in a global sense?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so, we've studied over a period of time the whole question of climate change and what people think about climate change. Do they believe? Do they not believe? Why do they believe? What are the reasons why they don't listen to climate realists, and in particular in Canada? Because the numbers in Canada are different than they are in the United States.
Yeah,
for instance.
They have much more open-mindedness to climate realism there.
Right. So what do we do differently in Canada in order to increase the number of people who are climate realists? Mm-hmm. And by extension, how do we impact the public policy process? So again, I just think it's important to have the discussion, understand the context of the discussion. It's not to say this group is doing things wrong, that group is doing things wrong. I think that, there are a lot of groups in this country that are doing really good work on this file. Mm-hmm. But I think that if you ask them, mm-hmm. they will agree that they haven't been very effective. There's a good illustration of that. Back in 1999, when I first started writing with Tim Patterson, we would get published literally from coast to coast in all the major newspapers, Vancouver Sun, Regina Leader, I guess it's called, Leader Post. I believe it is, yes.
Yeah, Hamilton Spectator, Montreal Gazette, Ottawa Citizen, Nova Scotia, the Halifax Herald, literally from coast to coast. And when we put out a press release in 2009 from Copenhagen, it was reported on literally from coast to coast. Doesn't happen anymore. Similarly, when the old Canadian Alliance were in opposition, they were making climate realist statements. Bob Mills did his filibuster, did a fantastic job. Stockwell Day before that. Preston Manning gave probably the best speech in the House of Commons ever on the climate realist side. But now, nobody in the House of Commons will do that. So, yeah, insofar as media and politicians and politics, we haven't been successful to this point. fact, we've gone backwards. So the approach that we've been taking is looking at what is it that drives public opinion, but more importantly, what is it that drives public policy? And I understand from your work that, in fact, public policy is not really driven very much by public opinion. Is that correct?
It's correct. But I can't take credit for any studies that corroborate that with that statement that you've just made. The truth is that there's been a great deal of research on what drives public policy and what drives public opinion. And the prevailing notion here in this country, and it's pretty widespread as well, but let's talk just about Canada, amongst people who are involved in the public policy process and in public advocacy, is that if you change public opinion then pressures politics, the political class, and politicians then follow suit. But that's actually not the way it's done, and there's plenty of research to back that up. We didn't have to do independent research. Mm-hmm. All we basically said was, well, look at the research that's been done already. The fact is that policy doesn't follow public opinion. Mm-hmm. Public opinion follows policy.
Yeah, no, there's some good examples of that, I would guess. For example, did public opinion support the GST before it was brought in?
No. In fact, the public was quite hostile to the GST. Uh-huh. But the GST, the goods and services tax, made sense. Now, there are going to be people out there who are going to hear that and they go, you tax and spend guys, okay? They don't really understand what was behind the GST and why it made sense and continues to make sense. But we're not going to get into that. The fact is that public opinion was very much opposed to the GST, but the government at the time went ahead, notwithstanding public opposition, and implemented it. And it played, I think, a significant role in not just the downfall of the Mulroney government. Well, Brian Mulroney, of course, was not the prime minister at the time. He had stepped down, and
the Campbell government.
Campbell became the prime minister, the leader of the party. So there were a lot of reasons for the Conservatives at the time, the progressive Conservatives federally, to lose the 93 election. But one of them, a significant one, was the GST. And they didn't just lose the election.
Oh, they got creamed.
It was the ultimate result is that the federal Progressive Conservative Party of Canada was destroyed.
Yeah.
It took a while for the corpse to finally become a corpse and stop breathing, but eventually, that was the end of them.
Because I think they only had 2 MPs after the election.
In that election, they elected 2 MPs.
Yeah, so they didn't even have party status.
Right. So it was, but that's a good example. But there are many examples. Seatbelt laws. Mm-hmm. Seatbelt laws. I mean, many of your listeners are not going to be old enough to remember the controversy about seatbelts, having to wear seatbelts. But, you and I, Tom, are at an age where I think you remember.
When we didn't have them.
It was, and not only that, I mean, we had seatbelts in our cars. They were just in the front seat at first, and then they started installing them in the back seat. But my parents not only did they not believe in wearing seatbelts themselves, but they did not allow us as children to wear seatbelts.
Oh, did they think it was
because they thought it was unsafe?
Oh, wow!
And that was a widely held view at the time. Uh-huh. Anyway, so the government at the time, through whatever research they were doing, determined that wearing seatbelts saved lives.
So the driver of public policy, what is it if it's not public opinion?
Actually, that's a great question. It's research, more focused lobbying. Mm-hmm. In order to push through a particular policy, and if you can show that what you want to achieve or what you want to accomplish in terms of policy is backed up by research, and you walk in with the graphs and all of this stuff, you're going to start to change people's minds and gain allies. Mm-hmm. We're living at a time where it's almost a perfect storm because there isn't a whole lot of critical thinking. So it's not hard to convince people of something that is untrue with a minimal amount of evidence that seems to support the conclusions that you're presenting.
Yeah.
It's
like a tornado hit Ottawa, must be climate change, must be man-made.
Sure. And it's funny because that was like 3 years ago. So, I guess all you had to do was declare a climate emergency, and lo and behold, tornadoes have disappeared, right?
Yeah.
So, but this is the quality of some of the research that's being presented, Tom. You have a tornado. The local municipal government declares a climate change emergency and tornadoes disappear. So somewhere out there, somebody's got a graph showing incidents of tornadoes on one axis, climate change emergency declarations on the other, and they go, all you have to do is declare a climate change emergency.
That's right.
And all of a sudden, tornadoes disappear.
Yeah, and cut your greenhouse gases. Yeah.
So, I'm being a little facetious, but that is the quality of some of the information that's being presented. And it's being presented more and more as time passes to people in politics who seem to lack a fundamental, just basic, solid education, where they would look at that graph and they go, okay, yeah, no, I'm sorry, that doesn't make sense. There must be something else going on here, another variable that you haven't taken into account. And of course, you're a scientist yourself, and so you understand that there's a very big difference between correlation and causation, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
All right. I'm not a scientist, but I learned that in high school physics and high school chemistry. And that kind of stuck with me. So when somebody comes and presents something to me that I'm a little skeptical about, I might ask a few questions. And all of a sudden we discover that, there are some other potential variables.
Yeah.
But nobody asks that question. Nobody talks about it. For instance, I heard the other day, we were talking about this earlier this afternoon, heard the other day that, I don't recall the source, but that last year was the 8th warmest year on record. Okay, well, if CO2 is directly related to rise in the average temperature in the world, how is it that last year could possibly have been the 8th?
Yeah.
Okay.
What about the other 7? They were all in the past. They were all hotter.
Okay, so the conclusion that an educated layperson should reach upon being presented with that information is there's something else going on. I don't know what the something else is. Okay, maybe you do, Tom.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody else does.
A weaker sun, that's probably it.
Okay, I don't know. But I know that there's another variable here involved, okay? Because the evidence doesn't what we're observing. What am I trying to say? The data doesn't support the conclusion.
Yeah, exactly. And it seems to me that when you go into an MP's office and you give them a good explanation with solid research, you also would have to show how it benefits them, because they're human beings and they want to stay in power. They want to win their next election. So the driver of public opinion then is more specifically things that benefit the MPs that you can show them. So essentially lobbying, that's what you're saying.
Right. And
the drivers of public policy, I mean.
Yeah, but I have to tell you that it's not just a question of being reelected. My experience of members of parliament, of elected politicians on all sides of the political spectrum, is that most of these people are decent people who get elected, and they really want to make a difference. And so this is really on the climate change file. This is actually really probably the biggest problem we have is we're dealing with people who genuinely, sincerely, if wrongly, believe that the Earth is on the verge of an existential crisis. Okay? And we hear that word bantered about quite a bit. let's understand what that means. Existential